Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am finally going to do my birth story for this little man. So, my birth story. I need to do one for my first baby, but that will be another story for another day. And I'm sorry for all the snuffly breathing through this, but my poor baby's sick, so you'll have to deal with the nursing breathing throughout this video. So anyways, my story. I was early with my first baby, and so I expected to be early with this one, and I was not. I had him at 40 and 5 days, and which was a super surprise for me and got me in a little bit of trouble, as you will find out. So I had gone in for October 5th. I had an appointment, I believe. Yeah, I had an appointment in the morning with my midwife. So that was my 41-week appointment, technically, even though I wasn't quite 41. It's just the way my appointments hit when, yeah, I always turned on the weekend, so I usually saw them a couple days before. So I went and saw them, and they were like, okay, the baby's measuring at 43 weeks, pretty big, not super comfortable with that, but they were like, whatever. They seemed to be like, okay, but the more they thought about it and they talked with each other, they were like, this is not good. We could get in trouble that she's measuring so high, and we didn't do anything about it. And obviously I had gestational diabetes. So they called me and said that I needed to book an ultrasound appointment to just check the size of the baby and make sure everything was okay. I was really upset about it because the last ultrasound I had was very nerve-wracking, and I was really freaked out by it, and it wasn't a good experience. And I had a feeling the baby was going to be quite big. My husband had had an accident. We were being given a lot of food, and I wasn't able to keep my diet as tight as I had been before. And I knew it wasn't as tight. I knew I was struggling a little bit with my fasting numbers. I was great with my after meal numbers. I always was, unless I ate something completely stupid like sugar or something deep fried. But if I wasn't eating sugar or something deep fried, basically my numbers are fine after I ate. But in the morning they were always a tiny bit high, which was not a great thing. But they had quit checking me because I'd had such great numbers for so long. I knew once I had the ultrasound and they saw how big the baby was that they were going to clamp down on me hardcore, and I'd probably just be in for a C-section. They wouldn't give me a chance for a VBAC. That would have been, they'd be all taken away because the baby was going to be big, and I had this horrible fear. So they said, well, if you want, we can do a sweep and see if we can get your body to go into labor sooner if it's ready. I mean, a sweep doesn't make you go into labor, but if your body's like just on the verge of going into labor, I think that it can promote it. So one of my midwives came over and did that, and she said you might want to have sex and do everything else you can think of that could maybe induce labor, because if you went into labor today, that would be optimal, so you don't have to have the ultrasound, because they knew I was so nervous to have this ultrasound, and they knew I wanted a VBAC, and they both knew that if I had an ultrasound with a big baby, that would be taken away from me. So we tried to do everything we could to have the baby, or to get my body in motion, and I went to bed. We went to bed around 10, as we usually do, between 10 and 11, and I was having contractions as I always did. Baby, why so noisy? As I always did around bedtime, and they didn't stop. They kept being there and continuing. They were getting pretty bad. And between 1 and 2 in the morning, I can't remember exactly when. I know I probably have documentation because I was doing some recording that night, but I just decided to video this video last minute, so. And here we go. But I know it was sometime between 1 and 2, and I called my midwife and said, I've been having contractions now for about 4 hours non-stop, 4 or 5 hours, and they're not slowing down. And when I lay down, they're not stopping. And it was the first time that had happened. And I was totally in denial that I could be going into labor because it was too good to be true. Like, we all were like, you need to go into labor tonight. That would be the best thing for you to go into labor tonight. And I was like, well, obviously that's not going to happen, because whenever you want stuff to happen, it doesn't happen. It's Murphy's Law. So I was just like, I'm not going to go into labor. So no big deal. That's fine that I won't go into labor, but I mean, I just won't. She told me that she was just like, okay, well, if anything else happens, just let me know. Otherwise, she's like, just keep laboring and we'll see. Hopefully it does something before the ultrasound. And so I was trying to I couldn't really relax. So they weren't necessarily like painful, but they were very uncomfortable. They were getting very uncomfortable. And so I was just kind of going through that. My parents were away on vacation in the mountains. So I had also texted my mom around 4 in the morning, I believe. 3 or 4 in the morning. And I was like, it looks like something's going to happen today. Because now we're on October 6th. And I also texted my sister, my sister's in town, and I was like, it looks like we're going to be needing to use you tonight because we needed one of them to drive us because I obviously couldn't drive and my husband still wasn't able to drive, and we needed someone to look after Josiah, my 5-year-old, while we went to the hospital. So at around 5, I know it's sometime, it was at 5:30 maybe. My sisters had come to the house because we were gearing up to go. We knew we were going to go sometime. I didn't know when, and I was a bit nervous because I knew that second babies can be a lot faster than first. And so I said, I think it was around 5:30, and my sister had come in and she was like, do you want me to press in your back? And I was like, please, because Isaac was just so unwell with his injury that he really didn't have any mental space or emotional space to give me while I was in labor. And she just saw that I was struggling and she was like, hey, do you want me to push in your back? And the angels sang. It was so beautiful. Well, she only pushed on my back for a little while and I was laboring. They were intense. I couldn't talk. I was having difficulty talking through them and stuff at this point. And suddenly my water broke. And my water had not broken. My water was broken for me in my first labor, so I'd never experienced spontaneous breaking of the waters. I was really surprised. I was like, whoa, what is that feeling? It's like gush. And so I had to get up and run to the washroom, and I'm like, sorry guys, there's stuff everywhere. And I went to the washroom, like, you need to call the midwife. Like, we need to go to the hospital now. My water's just broken. Things are happening. We're getting ready to rock and roll here, people. And like earlier in the night, a couple times I had some bloody show. Sorry, backtrack for that. Like just a little bit of stuff coming out. So I knew my cervix was moving, which was awesome. I knew stuff was happening, but my waters broke. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have the baby today. I don't have to have the ultrasound. I was so relieved. It was so nice. So my sister, one sister stayed with my brother, and my other sister, Kara, came with us to the hospital and dropped us off. It was kind of a rigmarole because I went to the wrong door, so then I had to walk through a whole corridor. We were at a hospital I didn't know because there were so many babies being born that night, that we had been sent to a hospital that was really far away. And so didn't know where I was, didn't understand where to be dropped off, and so I had to walk really far. And my husband was injured with his feet, and so he couldn't walk very far, and he was trying to get a hold of the midwife, and he was struggling with carrying my bags and I lost him. So I was bawling, and I was just weeping in the halls because I didn't know where I was. I couldn't find my husband. My sister was parking. My midwife wasn't there yet. So I'm just crying, and then when I saw her, I like burst into tears because I was just I felt so alone and I needed help, and I was just an emotional wreck. So they got me situated in a room, and I got to do some laboring in the hospital. My mom had been called, so she was on her way. We probably got to the hospital around, I'm thinking 6:30. Excuse me. I'm pretty sure my sisters came around 5. My water broke at 5:30. We got to the hospital around 6:15. I could be wrong. So I was checked. I know I was around 6 centimeters. So that was great. We knew we knew things were happening. The only problem was that when she tried to reach, the baby's head was not on the cervix. He was up floating in my belly. What are you doing? And so she was like, yeah, we need to get the baby down. So I labored hard for another about 5 hours, and I labored on the toilet for a while. I labored in squatting positions. I didn't really labor on the bed. I was trying to, she was really kind and tried to, you know, she would check the baby with the baby monitor, but the fetal monitor system, but she was letting me labor kind of by myself as much as possible. Apparently someone is wanting to be chatty patty over here, so yeah, I was super stoked that I was at 6 centimeters already. It felt like I was at, or 5 or 6 centimeters. It felt like I was nearing transition, and things were getting real intense, real hard. My mom showed up at some point. So between her and my sister, they were basically helping me cope with all my contractions. I had no drugs at this point. It was going all natural. VBAC was looking great. Then I got checked at around 12. And I was still the same, still 6 centimeters. Baby was still floating. I had just worked my buns off for 5 hours with no change. None. And I was so frustrated because the midwife sat me down and she's like, I need to talk to you. And I knew exactly what she was gonna say to me. And she was like, we have to start thinking about cesarean. And she's like, I know that's not what you want, but she's like, you have been working really hard and with absolutely no change. And she's like, it's, you know, it's not healthy. She's like, the baby's heart rate had dropped during one of my last contractions that she monitored, not through all of them and not dangerously so, but it had dropped. And she's like, he's going to get tired and then it's going to be dangerous. And she's like, I really want you to think about doing it as soon as you can kind of get your mind wrapped around it. So I was really disappointed and frustrated, so frustrated that I'd worked so hard and I'd done all these things and I'd been in this, I mean, labor had been going really well and I'd been doing so well in my laboring, both at home and at the hospital, and yet here I was with the big C word that I didn't want to have to do again, and my VBAC was just slowly sailing out the window. So super frustrating. Super frustrating. And I asked for 1 more hour, and I knew that at that point an OB would take over my care and the midwife would just be taking care of the baby. So I asked for 1 more hour. I said, can I try for 1 more hour? And if there's still absolutely no change, I'm like, I don't think 1 hour is going to change anything for his heart rate and stuff. I think that's safe. I asked, is that safe? And they were like, it probably is. He seems to be doing fine overall. Like 99% of the time he was fine. So they were like, you seem fine. He seems fine. They're like, you can try for another hour. But at that time, if there is no change, they're like, you're going into a cesarean right away. Like there's no questions. Cesarean. And I was like, okay. So I'm glad I did that for myself. It was a freaking hard hour. Like, freaking hard. It was so painful. And I think partly mentally knowing that this might be for naught made it so hard. And it was just brutal. But I don't regret that I asked for that, because I think I needed that hour to sort of wrap my mind around the fact that I had to go in for surgery. And this baby wasn't going to be born vaginally. I was going to have surgery, and I wasn't going to get to go home that night and all that kind of stuff. So I labored intensely for an hour. It was getting to the point where I basically couldn't bear the pain anymore, and I was wanting drugs. And yeah, they checked me. I just about died when I got checked. I thought I was going to die when I was checked that time. It was so intensely painful. And so the OB came and checked me, and yeah, they were like, nope, there's the baby still floating. They could barely scratch his head with their fingertips through the cervix. The cervix was exactly the same dilation because there was nothing pushing on it. So my body was trying to go on transition to push, but the head wasn't there to create that. So yeah, really frustrating, really frustrating. Oh, you're gonna poop now? Okay. And I was just, I was bummed. So I had to go into surgery, still like pretty sketchy, scary. And I remember I burst into tears and my mom gave me a hug because I get scared going away from people. I don't know what it is, but it's something I don't like. I hate leaving people that I know care about me. I feel very vulnerable and very worried that I won't see them again. So I cried. And I was wielded. It was much calmer. Everyone, I remember with my first cesarean, they were kind of like, ah, get in here, because his heart rate had dropped so drastically. He was doing quite badly. They were very nervous. So there was a lot of speed and scary faces and stuff, I feel like. Whereas this time they were kind of like, all right, let's get you into this bed. And they were more talking like this, and everything was chill. And I was more like, get the drugs in me now. Now, get the drugs in me now. Because I was... If any of you've had a baby without drugs, know that transition is the most painful part. And my body had been sitting in transition for at least an hour, possibly longer, which is why I was just at my limit. I couldn't, knowing especially that this was for nothing, the pain was for nothing. There was no point to it to open my cervix. Nothing was happening. I was just like, I can't do this. I cannot take this pain anymore. I need to have drugs. So, but of course they've got to like get you situated in a certain way and, you know, clean your back and do this. And finally I got the spinal and it finally started kicking in, and I was like, ah, finally. Because it was brutal. Brutal. So the cesarean was like totally easy, way easier this time because the baby was up floating. So I didn't even feel him come out. Whereas with Josiah, I felt a lot of like my body moved because he was down in my pelvis. So they were kind of having to jiggle him out. And this time it was just like, and suddenly I heard him screaming and I was like, wow, he's out? I didn't even know this was going on. So that was kind of cool. And he reddened up and was screaming right away. Super healthy, super red. They were super impressed. I said a lot of super there, sorry. And you were super big. The OB that was doing the operation, she's like, he's very large. She's like, you have a huge baby here. And she recommended, I don't know if you can hear this in our birth video. I'm gonna link it here, but it's quite funny because she's like, oh, someone I know named their son Maximus. That would be a good name for your son. And I'm like, yes, I know, he's a behemoth child. Stop. Well, they, you know, went and off to the corner to weigh him and measure him and take his vitals, and he was rock star awesome as suspected. And sorry, he's got all his like cradle cap eczema thing going on here. I don't know if you can see it. I can't see it in the camera right now, but it's terrifying in real life. But yeah, he was absolutely great, and because there was nothing wrong with him, they immediately brought him, and again, you can see this in the birth vlog, and Isaac was able to hold him right next to my face so I could talk to him and he could hear my voice right away. So both of us got a little bit of oxytocin, not the same way as skin to skin. It definitely wasn't my first choice, but it was nice that we got... Are you gonna be noisy? Mommy doesn't want you to be noisy. No. It was really nice to have that peace and calm of just us, you know, daddy and mommy and baby all together, and everybody was safe. And as they stitched me up and cleaned me out and stitched me up and everything. So that was really nice. Then when so after that was all done, they wheeled me into recovery, and the midwife was like, let's get this baby on your boob like pronto, because I mean there's a lot of indications and scientific studies about the baby nursing before 60 minutes. If a baby breastfeeds before 60 minutes after it's been born, there's a higher chance of breastfeeding being successful. So she wanted the baby because we were running out of time. We were at 15 or less minutes, and so she was like, we need to get this baby on you. So she got him to latch instantly, and he breastfed right away, and he was fine, his blood sugars were great after. My blood sugars were great. My gestational diabetes was gone. I didn't have to worry about anything, which was awesome. So I was bummed, obviously, but I felt like I did everything I could. And this time I felt like I was surrounded by people who cared about me and my choices. This time the baby they weren't nervous about the baby, so he wasn't whisked off to be checked, and I didn't see him for an hour or an hour and a half. I wasn't separated from my husband as he went off to see the baby. So there was so many good things about this cesarean. It was much better, besides the fact that it's abdominal surgery and bleh, boo, gross, recovery, nastiness that I hated. So now the hospital stay. I was just given a shared room, so there's like a sheet in between us, and it's an older hospital, which really sucked that we had to go to this older hospital, because the newer hospitals, you get your own room. It's separated by a bathroom, and so even though it's technically a shared room, it's not really shared, whereas this one was literally 2 beds with a sheet in between. Horrible. Horrible, horrible. I can't even believe I had to live through that. It's just so horrifying. The lady next to me the one night had a baby, and her baby was full of mucus. Some had not gotten all squeezed out when I think she'd had it vaginally, but it didn't get all squeezed out. So he kept on choking on his mucus, but it forced her to lay him on his back, because that's what the medical world says is safer. So he kept choking. And I was like, I can't even deal with this. There was so much drama because I had postpartum hypertension, because I had nurses that I hated, and I'm super sensitive. I know it's stupid. I wish I could change it, but I can't. And I just get super nervous when people take my blood pressure. If I don't feel like they believe in me or trust me, my blood pressure goes through the roof. So my blood pressure was bad, so the OBs wouldn't let me leave, and I had to stay in the hospital, and I was super bummed, and I hated it. I was so upset that I couldn't go home the next day, and then the next day, and so I didn't get to go home until Monday, Thanksgiving Monday the 9th. And let me tell you, that was the worst part of the whole experience, was having to stay in the hospital. Because they kept telling me, oh, you're gonna be able to go home on the 7th. Oh, you're gonna be able to go home on the 8th. No, finally on the 9th, I was just like, I'm out of here so fast. I don't want to see anyone here. I hate it. Like, there was a nurse, I think it was the very first night, because they have the babies on a schedule, and his blood sugar was fine, but she said it was, although it was fine, it was lower than she would have liked, or higher, or whatever it is. I think lower than she wanted it, even though it was totally in the normal range. And so she forced me to wake him up. Excuse me. She forced me to wake him up to feed him. And this kid, even in the womb, he was on a schedule. He slept for 3 hours. He woke up. He slept for 3 hours. Well, he's supposed to be on a 2-hour thing. So she had me poking and prodding and undressing him and blowing on him and all these things to try to get him to wake up. And he wouldn't wake up for that whole hour, because his body, he's always been a good sleeper. When it comes to like 3 or 4 hour chunks, he's just slept like that since before he was born. So he wouldn't sleep. He wouldn't wake up, I mean. And so I was torturing my baby. I was sitting there in tears, trying to wake my baby up and be obedient to what they wanted me to do. But I was like, my baby's being tortured to stay on your track, even though he's in the normal range. Like, oh, so frustrating. And so, yeah, it was pretty brutal. It was brutal to have Thanksgiving. Like, my family always celebrates it on Sunday. And so I missed Thanksgiving dinner. I had to have it alone in the hospital, and they do try to make it nice. That day though, Sunday the 8th, I actually got a good nurse finally. And this nurse, she snuck me ice cream, because I told her I was craving it, because I couldn't have it since July. And so she snuck me an ice cream cornet thing, and that was sort of the life-changing thing. That's the reason my blood pressure went down, I think, was because her and my next nurse I had after her, my blood pressure went down. Also, I asked to be moved to a private room. They don't have very many private rooms in this hospital, but I asked her, I'm like, if one comes open, can you tell me, because I want to be out of here. And I am so glad I did, because the lady that I was next to, that I was telling you about, her baby was choking on its mucus all the time. Oh, my little nose, your nose is so stuffy. Anyways, her baby was choking. They had a code blue that night, and I knew my old room number, and it wasn't my room number, so I know it was her baby that had code blue. He quit breathing. He turned blue from not breathing because of the mucus, and I was just like, would you freaking let her put the baby on her stomach? She kept asking, can I put the baby on his stomach so when he chokes, at least it will come out of his mouth instead of sitting in his throat? And they were like, no, it's not healthy. Insanity blew my mind, and it was so stressful to me just listening to this baby, and I was like, it's gonna choke to death, and I practically did. Luckily it didn't. I did see them leave the next day too, so I know the baby was okay. But they were walking so fast out of that hospital, I'm sure they were just like, we are going home and laying this baby on its belly so that it will survive. Anyways, I can rant about that for a long time, so I will stop because it's not part of my story. Finally, on the morning of October 9th, they gave me my papers to leave. He was allowed to leave on the 7th. He got his papers to leave on the 7th. He was totally fine, but I wasn't. And because of the hypertension, especially to like have been carrying like such a huge baby, because he was 9 pounds. I never even said this. Wow. So he was 9 pounds, 14 ounces and 22 inches long. And I can't remember all his other stats, but those are the two main ones, right? People want to know that you were super long, super long, super long. Hi. Hi. He was super long and super big. But that was the story how you came to be born. And I thought you were going to be Joseph, but I wasn't sure. But that's your name, Joseph Theodore. So our little Teddy, that's our story of how little Teddy Cabrera came to be into this world. Yeah, I hope that that covered his birth story. And if you have any questions, leave them down below for me in the comments. And yeah, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. Thumbs up for that, because I have a feeling this video is going to be quite long. So thanks for watching and supporting me, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye. Wrapped up in each other's arms, and we'll shine so brightly as we float amongst the stars. It will shine so bright.